Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. Just let me know if you can hear me fine. Just dimming this light a bit so my eyes don't die. Oh, Lee, it says they're member for 10 months. So I hope you can all see me okay and hear me okay. I'm using this new setup of mine. It should be fairly clear. A glitch, what? Hi there, welcome. We just had about 90 people waiting, and I don't know why it always drops down to about 70 people. Sound is good, light also. Okay, awesome. Um, yeah, I've spent quite a bit of money on a decent camera, as I've said, and I got a new laptop that'll help me stream better because it connects to the internet a lot faster. So hopefully that'll sort out a few things. But thanks very much. This is going to be very important for you to share with your friends. Okay. Now, I said earlier, I haven't touched the ANC before specifically for one simple reason, and that is destabilization in the country. And once I lay out to you how the ANC started, how it got to where it is now, and I'm not going to bother too much with the later years post 1994. I don't want this to be much longer than 30 minutes, so I'm not going to keep you for too long. But I want to go into the history of the African National Congress, and the best way to find that is actually to go to the website. If you go to the ANC's website, it's called anc1912.org.za, the history. It gives you a basic history as they would want to relate it on the African National Congress. So they cannot say that you are trying to misplace it or change it or anything like that. But I'm going to give you my perspective because they start off with their history, and I'll give you a link to the page right now so that you can go and watch it while you watch this video if you want. Okay, there it is. Hello to all of you. We have over 200 people watching. Hopefully we'll get a lot more people watching this video. And so there's a link on the ANC1912.org.za history. I mean, you can go and look at the history in many other places, but I'm going to tell you what I know. And I'm going to put that history into perspective because that changes everything. And on the history page, it speaks about a brief history of the African National Congress. Then it starts in a calendar 1816 to the 1900s, the African kingdoms. And it speaks here about Van Riebeeck that gets blamed for everything, landing in 1652. And I'm not going to get involved in discussions around that. He's not my forefather. I didn't know him, so I can't speak for him. So I'll rather remain quiet. But then it starts at 1912, where they say the ANC is formed. And if you actually look at the people that formed the ANC, then you'll see there's a picture. I use it as my thumbnail because that was a real start of what is called the African National Congress today. Left to right, Thomas Mtobi Mapikela, Reverend Walter Sebusana, Reverend John Dubé, Saul Msane, and Saul Plaiki. Now, a lot of you will know or you would have heard of these people, and I want to put it into context. These people were not politicians. As you can see here, that two of these were reverends, and if you see what they wanted to do, then you will understand how colonialism took place. The British came to South Africa, the British settlers of 1820. So they've been here for a long time. We had the Great Trek, the people that trekked away from the British that settled here, but the British didn't just want to settle here. They literally wanted to force their religion down everyone's throat, etc. They did this all over the world. And they wanted all the minerals and wealth of the country. So when gold and diamonds were discovered, they were all over that. And I will do separate videos on that. And that is not isolated from the African National Congress or the movement or how it actually was established. The gold rush, the diamond rush was very much a part of the history of the African National Congress. And like I said, I'm going to give you a very different spin. The ANC was formed at a time when South Africa was changing very fast. Diamonds had been discovered in 1867 and gold in 1886. Mine bosses wanted large numbers of people to work for them in the mines. Laws and taxes were designed to force people to leave their land. The most severe law was the 1913 Land Act, which prevented Africans from buying, renting, or using land except in the reserves. Many communities or families immediately lost their land because the Land Act for millions of other people, it became very difficult to live off the land. The Land Act caused overcrowding, land hunger, poverty, and starvation. Now, the first thing you need to understand is this is a Bavarian Illuminati plan that's being implemented. It's typical, and it was very well orchestrated. You had to remove the people from the land that they believed was theirs and make them dependent on government and large corporations. People, listen very carefully to what I'm saying because you followed very soon after. Okay. Many people were already caught up at that stage, and you must understand how the Anglo Boer War, the first and the second Boer War, took place just before then in 1910. As I've said before, the Voortrekkers wanted a monument to commemorate the big trek, and these weren't Afrikaners, okay, at all. These people were not Afrikaans speaking. So soon I'm going to go into the African National Congress's history, and I'm going to tie it up with what happened with Afrikaners so that you can see how an influence from outside the country was brought in to subvert both sides that were created, white and black. And it's horrible to use color at this stage, but all of you watching, just understand the reference point within which I'm doing this and how division was created deliberately in this country, and how that division has been strong unto this very day and has caused deep-seated wounds. It was all a part of a very well orchestrated plan to absolutely annihilate the Boers and the local tribes. And this had to be done to get control of those people, get them to work for the British colonialists, settlers, but Britain represented the Rothschild family. As I've discussed before in my Double O Days meetings, the Rothschild family took control of Britain when they gave the King of England the choice to end up like King Louis of France with his head lopped off, or whether he would accept the Reserve Bank and literally make Britain a slave to the Rothschild financial system. When they brought that system to South Africa, it was exactly the same thing. And Cecil John Rhodes fits in here nicely, as well as many organizations that were formed, including the Freemasons, the Broederbond, and many others. So at this stage, the African National Congress was just formed. It wasn't political or anything like that. All these people wanted to do, these founders, was to unite people against a common enemy. And we are doing exactly the same thing today. We are trying to liberate the country because we are still captive. And to do that, we need to unite, except this time, all of us need to come together. People from all backgrounds, religions, cultures, to fight this global enemy. And we are exposing it for what it is. So 1913s, working for a wage. Yeah, they speak about the people struggling to survive, the African National Congress getting going, but struggling financially. In other words, the movement practically died during that time. Okay, it says here Jante Gomedi was elected president of the ANC in 1927. He tried to revitalize the ANC in order to fight these racist policies. Gomedi thought that the communists could make a contribution to the struggle and wanted the ANC to cooperate with him. However, in 1930, Gomedi was voted out of office and the ANC became inactive in the 1930s. And, you know, at that stage, they had a very conservative leadership. So, yeah, the ANC basically comes to an end. And this is very important to understand. And what is important to understand here, those of you that have followed me as channel members on Thursday night at 8 o'clock, you can come and join us if you want. If you join as a channel member, you will know that from 1930 onward, the Afrikaner concept started to happen. It was absolutely being pushed. There was funding for it. There were plans all of a sudden for the Voortrekker Monument, where before in 1910 there was no money for it. There was just nothing. So where did this money come from? Where did this idea come from? And you will see now all of a sudden in the ANC in 1940s, it says the ANC gains new life. Where did this life come from in the 1940s all of a sudden? So all these people that had all these good ideals initially, that is gone. The original ANC, the African National Congress, does not exist anymore. And you can go and read the detail in the link that I gave you if you're interested. But this is important to understand. So we have two parallel things taking place here. We have the foundations of a black nationalist movement, deliberately created, and I'm going to explain to you how that happened. The same thing with a so-called white nationalist movement, but it's two nationalist movements, which means they absolutely clash with each other, and this was always planned from the very beginning. So 1940s, the ANC gains new life. You will see in the 1930s, the plans were drawn up for the Voortrekker Monument, and they actually started building the structure. The whole concept of Afrikanerdom started to be pushed and promoted, and propaganda was put out. And the Afrikaans language was being put forward as something very unique. This was happening in parallel with Nazi Germany. Okay? So, the ANC gains new life. The ANC was boosted with new life and energy in the 1940s, which changed it from the careful organization it was in the 1930s to the mass movement it was to become in the 1950s. So, careful, conservative up to 1930, and all of a sudden, this big change. Where did this come from? It was orchestrated. And once you see the links between what happened in the so-called prior apartheid government and what happened within the African National Congress, bingo, the light will go off and you will see how the Bavarian Illuminati apologists throughout the country orchestrated all of this. They planned it on both sides, implemented it, and it's brought us to where we are today, where you can literally bring an entire nation to its knees. That is what they planned originally, so that you can bring a one world government into being. One of the biggest things you have to do to break down a nation's pride is break down culture, break down religion, break down the family, break down male and female, break down anything that people hold on to and hold dear. You need to break it down. And these people that adhere to the Bavarian Illuminati doctrine were very well trained in doing this. And Jan Smuts was one of those people. But I will speak just now about the people within the African National Congress that came into the movement, started influencing the movement. Most of them Zionist, most of them Jewish, all of them from the Ashkenaz line. And this is not anti-Jewish people, okay? Because most Orthodox Jewish people wouldn't do this, wouldn't get involved in politics. And I'm going to give you another link that you can go and read. There we go. Please copy this link and go and read this information. You can find it in many other places as well. But to understand the Jewish influence in South Africa, and specifically the Zionist influence, why the people became Zionist, and why that doctrine, the Bavarian Illuminati doctrine, that ended up in the Zionist movement in the US was brought to South Africa, and how it became very strong. And now most Jewish Orthodox people didn't get involved in any of this at all. They weren't interested, but a few did. And you have to understand why they did this. Wow, we have over 400 people watching. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. This is very important information that I'm putting out right now. So the ANC gains new life in the 1940s. And this is the crucial part, okay? Increase attacks on the rights of African people, And the rise of extreme Afrikaner nationalism created the need for a more militant response from the ANC. Harsher racism also brought greater cooperation between the organizations of Africans, coloureds, and Indians. In 1947, the ANC and the Indian Congress signed a pact stating full support for one another's campaigns. So this became an organized thing. In 1944, the ANC Youth League was formed. And this is crucial. So if you look at the dates, look at what happened in 1948 and look what's happening here before then, 1944. The ANC Youth League was formed. The young leaders of the Youth League, among them Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and Oliver Tambo. Okay, not part of the original movement at all. This is new, brand spanking new. And this is important to understand. And that link that I just gave you, you will see how deeply involved Nelson Mandela was with the Jewish community, especially the Zionist community. And if you don't understand that, you won't understand the negotiations that happened later and how the transition in 1994 took place. And I'll get to that in a short while. Remember, this is just a start. I'm going to make detailed videos on this history with pictures, etc., so that you can watch that in future. So if you actually look at this history of this youth league, okay, you will see that they base their ideas on African nationalism. So now you have Afrikaans nationalism and you have African nationalism. You have two clashes. So why in 1944 did the ANC Youth League start? And why did the government, the Afrikaner government that was established out of nothing, when nothing like that existed, Afrikaans was only accepted as a real language in the 1970s. Before then, it was called a slang of Dutch, literally, okay? Ask yourself why this coincided with each other. This is not by chance. They believed Africans would be freed only by their own efforts. The Youth League aimed to involve the masses of people in militant struggles. In other words, they believed that they needed to be militant. Remember, original ANC founders up to 1930, conservative, no fighting, no war or anything like that. All of a sudden, militant. Many more people moved to the cities in the 1940s to work in new factories and industries. They began to form their own community organizations such as a squatter movement and trade unions. The militant ideas of the Youth League quickly found support among the new population of the cities. The Youth League drew up a program of action calling for strikes, boycotts, and defiance. It was adopted by the ANC in 1949. So that is just after 1948. And you know what happened then with Hendrik Verwoerd. The year after the National Party came to power. So now you have a nationalist, African nationalist movement. You have the National Party in power, and the program of action led to the defiance campaign of the 1950s. It's all coming together, amalgamating. And this is what a lot of people miss, is that this was orchestrated, okay? And then it speaks of a mass movement that is born, etc., etc. And what a lot of people don't understand is that most of the people involved at the time, okay, helping the ANC to become who they were, funding them, were Zionists. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. The Bavarian Illuminati was founded by Amschel Rothschild, and we also had the original founder or the person that said that they need to start a new movement, Adam Weishaupt, and Amschel Rothschild, that encouraged him to do exactly that. And when the Bavarian Illuminati was formed, a very specific plan was created to create a one world government one day, a perfect society. So you will see within the African National Congress and within the National Party, a perfect society mentality starting, a new world order of their own, creating an order amongst themselves, but two opposing orders. This is exactly what played out. And what it causes in the end is mutual destruction, to the point where people will be on their knees, and we are very close to that point right now, and then people will relent to a one world government. This is not just played out in South Africa. It is played out in various ways in many other countries. And like I said, the apartheid government was created in parallel to the German government and the rise of Hitler. It was no different. It was literal two parallel copies. And it's the same with the African National Congress. And back then already, it was planned that one day there needs to be an African nationalist movement to govern the country. They knew already back then that they needed to pick an organization, raise an organization that'll one day defeat the Boers because of the Boer Wars. I mean, you had a few thousand Boers fighting hundreds of thousands of British. And at the end of the day, they came very, very close to winning many of these battles. And if they had better numbers, it would be a completely different story. So they understood the resilience of the local tribes as well as the Boers that trekked. And they were a combination of French, Germans, and Dutch speaking people. And they realized that the only way to conquer these people, to conquer these new nations, is to make them strong and they get full control of them, and then you can break them down. And the plan has worked perfectly and has played out exactly as they wanted, except for one simple thing. Through this resilience, what they forgot is that people started building up literally an immunity to trouble, nonsense, war, and anything else. And living in a constant state of fear, they didn't understand how that would play out on the people, how it will make them more self-reliant, how it would make them more resilient. People living in informal settlements, people living in the rural areas, people that come out of the trek, settling in towns all over the country that had very little, that survived on almost nothing. They had tough children. They were farmers. I mean, they withstood some of the worst attacks, Kitchen's scorched earth policy, and many other things. What they have created is a nation of people that are so resilient that the only way you could influence them now is through the minds of their children. And I'm not going to go into the detail of that now. I want to continue with how very specific leaders came into the ANC movement and started making a huge difference. And amongst those people will be Joe Slovo. There will be Ruth First, who was his wife, and she was later assassinated with a parcel bomb. Ronnie Casserols, and many others. If you think of Albie Sachs, it's endless the amount of people that actually got involved in that anti-apartheid struggle. And these people, and I want to read you an extract from this writing on the Jewish movement in South Africa. It says, moreover, some 50 to 60% of the community's children attended Jewish day schools rather than public or non-Jewish private schools. Faced with a competing South African nationalism, black nationalism, and Afrikaner nationalism, so there's a whole lot of nationalisms going on, neither of which identified at all with Jews, they became overwhelmingly Zionist and deeply attached to Israel, which at that stage was run by the Rothschilds. I mean, the Rothschilds literally had Israel handed to them through the Balfour Agreement. You can go and read the Balfour Agreement, and then you will see how that land in Israel was handed to Sir the Rothschild. Okay? So much that being unsympathetic to the Jewish state was commonly regarded as a sign of self-hatred. In other words, they were saying that if you were anti-Zionist or not Zionist, or not for the Jewish state, then you are almost anti-Semitic, which is not true. And even some of the dictionaries that came out of late will call someone that is anti the Jewish state, they will call them anti-Semitist, and that's not true. That's not true at all. That's absolutely a matter of opinion. So anti-Zionist doesn't make you anti-Semitist at all. But a lot of people will disagree with that. No account of South African Jews could overlook the trauma of the 1930s and early 1940s. In Eastern Europe, when they left both deep roots and extended families, the Holocaust had all but erased all traces of what had been an essential Jewish presence. So what they are trying to say here, and like I said, you can go and read the entire writing. It's quite a few pages, and it's an extract, okay? You will understand that a lot of these people are said to have had sympathy with the people now being forced off their land, etc. So the apartheid system that's being implemented, they're saying that a lot of the Jewish people, especially the Zionists, had a very strong aversion to all these things that happened to the African tribes, especially in South Africa, and how they were being used as labor in the mines, etc., etc. So it's very easy to sugarcoat this and remove the fact that there were literal organizations involved. On the Afrikaner side, there were organizations involved like the Broederbond that was established to try and protect the Afrikaner interest when they didn't even know what Afrikaner meant at that stage. But, you know, there's certain people that absolutely believed in the Bavarian Illuminati doctrine that were in a Broederbond that subverted everything that they were doing and brought us to the point where we were, to the point where we would transition to a government where Nelson Mandela would be president or any other person that they would pick at the time. But very early on, I know for a fact in the 1970s, and it could have been much earlier, they had known that the ANC would be the movement to replace the apartheid government. That decision was made way back, and I have evidence for that. And Pik Botha, Dennis Warrell, and Chris Yunus discussed that in a meeting in Cape Town, in a hotel. They discussed that handover. That was in the late 1970s. So the fact that they knew this, we know that Pik Botha was a Freemason. He was also a Broederbonder. It was part of the plan. They knew they had a plan to implement. Now, a lot of people in the Broederbond might not have understood what they were doing, or that these people were subverting their actions. If you look at the life of Constant Viljoen, people will fall over backwards if they understand what he had actually done. But let's get back to the ANC. Now, when you speak about the ANC and you speak about Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo and so on, these people are being put on a platter and they are being held up here. You have to look at who was behind them, who funded them, who empowered them. This is what you have to look at. And this is not something that will be in the front. Nowhere in the front lines will you see the Zionist influence. Nowhere at all. So people like Joe Slovo, he was a communist, a Marxist-Leninist. And why is this relevant? Because if you look at the Soviet Union, if you look at the pogroms that took place there, if you look at how they got rid of Tsar Nicholas II, you will see that it was absolutely Zionist Ashkenaz Jewish people that went into Russia. They weren't even Russian, and created these pogroms. It was all planned by the Bavarian Illuminati in detail. And although that organization didn't exist anymore, the blueprints for their plan was already drawn up. And because I saw those blueprints, I understand how they operate, how they implement, and I can see which plan is being implemented right now in South Africa. And in Russia, it was very successful. These random acts of absolute mayhem where places get burned down, people just get shot. And what these programs did was it made the people feel insecure. And I'm going to bring you back to the ANC's methods, because you need to understand how the exact same methods was being used and how Joe Slovo got involved in the Communist Party and Umkhonto we Sizwe. You need to understand those links and how the same tactics were used in South Africa. we're going to bomb people, we're going to burn places down, we were just going to shoot people randomly, unprovoked, we're just going to attack a church in Cape Town. These are the things that were planned. It was textbook Bavarian Illuminati plans. And so the ANC just became an extension. Just like they had the pogroms in Russia, exactly the same thing was now going down in South Africa. And this is important to understand. You can't separate the two. What I see is a universal perspective coming down to a global perspective. And if you see that global perspective, you will see evil influencing people across the world to implement these absolutely horrible things, where people are just mowed down. And these programs are still ongoing today. But why did they think it was okay? Why did the African National Congress think that it was okay to go and hurt and kill other people? They needed to, in the 1950s and in the 1960s, they needed to have this armed struggle. I mean, in the 1960s, the armed struggle started, Umkhonto we Sizwe was formed, and you'll see all the people that were actually a part of MK. Where did the funding come from, people? You need to understand the Rothschilds' influence and funding behind all of these actions. And this is what's hidden from people, is a Bavarian Illuminati plan for South Africa. And as long as that plan is missing, you'll understand nothing. And it's important for you to understand that the military struggle and the struggle for what they call people's power, and the struggle later that started as a political struggle, not just people's power, but now for government. You need to understand how that transition happened. I've got a lot of smoke inside here with me that's come from somewhere, so I hope I survive this. Wow, it's actually quite bad. I don't know if you can see it behind me. So it's very important for you to understand that what happened back then is all linked to a Bavarian Illuminati plan that was drawn up by Adam Weishaupt. The ANC was formed at the same time, the organized ANC formed at the same time as the apartheid government, and all people with the same Bavarian Illuminati plan. And Jan Smuts was one of those people in the Broederbond with those plans. He wanted to implement those plans. He believed in this unique, perfected race, perfected society, a society where people don't have choices. Now, we've already gone over our time. I'm going to have to cut this short because I'm going to have to evacuate this room and find out what's going on. We have over 500 people watching now. I really want to thank you for coming into this live stream and for listening and for watching. I'm going to give you the links again for this section that you can read on the Jewish influence in South Africa. Remember, the Zionist influence is what's most important. Okay, I'm battling to breathe right now. I need to get out of this room immediately. But thank you for joining me. And I will make detailed videos on that history so that you can see how we have absolutely been bamboozled. And I just wanted to make that past clear for you, and how that history of the ANC and the National Party tied together was orchestrated by other people, and how we've all been fooled all this time. Thank you very much. I need to get out of here. I'm actually in a bad state at the moment, and find out what on earth is going on in here. Good night.